My name is Elisa Heikura. I work as a developer of people. In Finnish that is Koodarikuiskaaja, which means that for the past 4.5 years I've been teaching mostly technical experts, but also people working with technical experts, all sorts of soft skills. And I started working with the software industry back in 2013, almost 10 years ago. And back then I was 25 years old. And even since the day one, I started to realize that we have a lot of problems with other people. And be it at home or at work, most of our problems seem to be other people related. Yes, of course, we might have technical problems, or we might have economical problems, or we might have environmental problems. But for some reason, we tend to be much more okay with those problems. We tend to handle those problems with quite much more ability than we can handle people problems. When it comes to other people, we tend to be really upset, really frustrated, and it's really hard to get over it. So the one topic that kept on coming with me when I transported my career from being a communicator and then a marketer and then an entrepreneur working with digital marketing and then a developer of people, the one topic that kept on coming with me was the repeating story among the technical people that everything would be just fine if only there were no other people. And I thought that this is really interesting. Like, there's this growing mass of people building software, building products with people, for people, thinking that people are the problem. And I thought that there's something really interesting here. And I tried to unpack and unravel what is going on. And I had to come across with 3 different concepts, three different ideas before I had the revelation that I try to share with you today. And the first one was that in this industry, everybody seems to have a villain. Developers tend to complain about salespeople, that salespeople sell ridiculous things. And they sell things with ridiculous timetables and ridiculous budgets. And they only care about the money. And they don't never ask technical people what would be realistic or even sense to do. And developers tend to complain about designers who only care about the glitter and the unicorns and the rainbows and who design things that are ridiculously impossible to create and do and make technically no sense at all. And they complain about the customer, who is most often an idiot, who doesn't know what they're buying, and who doesn't understand the value of things, and who doesn't understand why something is a big thing and something is a small thing, and which is a big and which is a small thing. And on the other hand, designers complain about developers for not following the design, for not understanding why a pixel there or here is important, for not speaking the same language, for being sometimes rude or even arrogant. And designers complain about customers, and sometimes they complain about sales. And of course, you know that sales complains about developers and designers for not doing things on time, and client complains about everything. And then everybody complains to project manager, who then complains to their therapist. So we tend to keep on complaining about one another. And when I came from the realm of humanities, looking at things from outside, I could understand each and every body of them. I could understand the developer, I could understand the designer, I understood even the salesperson, and I understand the client. And to me, none of them was the asshole the other person was complaining them to be. I could understand that they were all trying to do a good job. They thought that they were doing a good job. They wanted to be good people. And yet, for some reason, somebody was always thinking that they are the asshole in the equation. And funnily, never, ever, ever did anybody think that they were the problem. So if everybody is complaining about everybody else, and nobody is thinking that they are the bad guy, then who is the bad guy? So that was my first thing that made me think that there's something a little bit awry here. Then the second thing was that I was teaching in one of the workshops, and there was this one developer who at the pause came to talk to me, and he said, Elisa, our biggest communication problem is the fact that other people don't read. That's the reason why we have communication problems in this company. Like, it doesn't matter how clearly you write the message, they simply won't read it. And I looked back at him and I said, if you know for a fact that they won't read it, why do you keep on writing it? So if you know for a fact that something is not working, and you still keep on trying to make it work, you know the saying? You know this one? You know who it's normally quoted to? Einstein. It wasn't Einstein's. This is actually from the relatives of anemic alcoholics. So the people who are living with people who have alcoholism. So if you know for a fact that something is not working and you still keep on insisting that other people should behave the way you want, you might have a problem. And on the other hand, when is the last time that you have started to behave the way you don't want to behave just because somebody else wanted you to? If somebody says to you that please behave the way I want you to behave because I want you to behave that way, it's never a reason enough for us to do so. So if we don't expect ourselves to change because someone else wants us to change, why do we expect other people to change when we want them to change? That sounds like a weird assumption. And then the second thing was that even though, well, hang on, let's ask a question. With a show of hands, how many of you have somebody in your life that pisses you off at the moment? About half the room. The rest of you are outstanding people.
Liars.
And maybe liars. How many of you knows a person who doesn't seem to get upset or pissed off about anything or anybody ever? Yeah, half a room again. So you know these people, no matter what happens, they tend to not get pissed off. You know, this person. Like the room is on fire, this is fine. The client is being an idiot, this is fine. The designer designed something that is ridiculous to do, it's fine. The salesperson gave you an unbelievably tight schedule, still fine. There are these people, so how is it possible that they exist if the rest of us are always pissed off about things and people? And here's where the third revelation came from. We moved to Paimio with my spouse in 2020. And as it is in Paimio, we have quite a lot of space and just one neighbor. But that one neighbor was the type of neighbor who thought it was a good idea to park their car on our property. One neighbor, our property. I was so pissed off about that neighbor. I was so ready to order a betoniporsas and put it on the spot where they parked the car. But the funny thing was, my spouse was not pissed off at all. And I don't know which was more irritating, the neighbor or the fact that my spouse was not pissed off with me about the neighbor. And I had been pissed off about it for a long time, and then one day I was drinking coffee and I realized that we are having the exact same experience. We own the property 50-50. We have the same neighbor. That same neighbor is parking their car on our property. It's the exact same situation. Yet I am ready to kill the neighbor. And he's completely fine. And I realized that it is not the parking of the car that is pissing me off. It's the interpretation that I'm giving about the behavior. I was interpreting their behavior as arrogant, as breaking my boundaries, as being neglecting and an asshole-ish thing to do, frankly. And he was like, well, it's far away, we don't see it, we don't use it to anything, what does it matter? He didn't think it as a breach of our property or the boundaries. And this is where it came and dawned onto me that whenever we have a reaction about another person's actions, that reaction doesn't come from the action itself, it comes from the interpretation of that action. And why this matters is because we can give the same action completely different interpretation if we have more data of what's going on. It might be that they are being an asshole on purpose and parking the car there just to piss me off, or might be that they don't even know that it's our property. Or might be that she is, what I know that she is, a single mother doing 3 night shifts, coming home in the middle of the night, having snow and ice all over the roads. Her house is downhill. It's a really steep hill with a high curve. Which is more safe for her? Try to drive that car down there or park it on our property. Her daughter is 4 years old. I'm not pissed off about that. So we changed our reaction when we changed the interpretation of the action. And why does that matter? Because that's the only thing we can control. We have no control over what other people do. And we don't even have any control over our emotions. But our emotions come after the interpretation. And if we change the interpretation, we change the emotions, we change our reaction, which will change the outcome of the situation. Because our interpretation will become a self-fulfilling prophecy. Had I felt irritated, have I felt angry, have I felt like she's being an asshole, and I had approached her about the topic, no matter how kindly would I have chosen my words, no matter how well intended would my actions have been, she would have known that I'm pissed off about her. We have a sense for these things. You have all been in a situation where you're with a person who is trying to be polite, and you can see that they are not being polite. So we can try to change our words, we can have all sorts of tricks when we communicate with other people, but if we don't mean well, it doesn't come out well. And when we approach people assuming that they are assholes, assuming that they are being assholes on purpose, assuming that they have bad intent, assuming that they are bad people, they tend to feel that we're attacking. And what do we do when somebody attacks us? We attack back. We become defensive over their reaction, and we attack and jump over their accusations and try to prove them wrong, which end up just proving that we were right. But were we? What would have their actions and reactions been if we would have approached them with another view? If I had approached them with curiosity and wanting to understand what's going on and kindly letting them know where our property lines are and that sort of a thing. So when we tend to approach people with the idea that they are being bad people, we tend to make them bad people. We're actually participating in making them behave exactly the way we don't want them to behave. If I think somebody is being lazy, I tend to behave that way. We tend to do corrective actions that way. And when the other person senses that they are being supervised or micromanaged, they have zero interest on being any more hardworking or any more diligent, and they end up being just as lazy as we expected them to be. And it works that way with nearly every assumption, every interpretation you might have. So when often people ask me, like, why do I have to approach the person that is being an asshole like they are not being an asshole? It's precisely because that's the only thing you can do. And then the other question is, why can't they be better? Well, they should be, but they can't be. If they were better, they wouldn't behave that way in the first place. And you have always the option of not doing that, and you can still keep on being pissed off, like I promised in the beginning. That's always an option. You can stay on being pissed off, but you keep on having the problem because the only thing you can change and the only thing you can control is your own behavior. So I would encourage you to absorb an idea which is revolutionary, and that's the fact that nobody is an asshole on purpose. There's the asterisk, because apparently 1% of people are sociopaths and they are assholes on purpose, but 1%, it's safe to assume that the person you're talking to is not an asshole on purpose. So if they behave in an asshole kind of way, you should be curious, like, what's going on? Why are they behaving that way? What are they seeing that I don't see? What information am I lacking? What information are they lacking? What's going on here? When you approach a person from a curious standpoint, you don't accuse them of anything, and they don't have to attack you back. And you actually get to have a fruitful conversation, and might be that the problem goes away. So in general, when we think about other people, it doesn't really seem worthwhile to keep on being angry at other people for being people. Like, we're all somehow fallible. Nobody is perfect. I know we tend to think, especially in the mornings, that I am perfect, but when we go to bed at night, we tend to think that I'm not perfect. So nobody's perfect. And if you remember the example from the beginning, everybody tends to think that the other person is the villain. You at the moment are thinking that they are ignorant and stupid, and at the same time they are thinking the exact same thing about you, but you are not ignorant and stupid, are you? No, you're not. You're a good person, doing a good job, with the talents that you have, with the budget that you have, with the timetable that you have, with the skills that you have. You don't mean bad things, neither does the other person. They don't mean bad things. So instead of screaming at the rock for being on your path, instead of being angry at other people for behaving the way they behave, I try to encourage you to start adjusting the situation and trying to find an alternate route around the rock. And I want to stress here that accepting the fact that other people don't do bad things on purpose does not mean that you have to accept people's behavior as is, or think that it's okay for other people to be rude or park on your property or that sort of thing. You don't have to accept the action even if you try to give it a nicer and more cooperative interpretation. On the contrary, it means that when you are trying to understand what is going on, you can actually change the behavior. We are much more likely to change our ways when we are approached from a cooperative point of view than when we are accused of being the way we are. Remember, they're not being asshole on purpose, so they have some sort of a reason for behaving the way they do. And it's really hard to hear that the way I've been behaving has been bad for another human being. It kills our egos a bit, so we need to have some psychological air to actually admit that we might have made a mistake, that we might need to alter our way of being and adjust our actions. So trying to find an alternate route around the problem takes you much more farther than trying to be angry at the rock that's on your way. And by adjusting, I don't mean that you have to stop being who you are. I just mean that giving the other person also the possibility to be who they are. Which brings me to my last point, which is this. People being irritating is not a bug in our human operating system, it is a feature. We tend to be irritated about people or with people who are not like we are. It's easiest to get along with people who are like we are. Although sometimes if they are too much like we are, that's also irritating. So they need to be similar enough, but not completely like us. So that's the niche. Those are the not irritating people. And the rest are the irritating people. Now, with diversity, when we have more diversity in our companies, in our projects, in our lives, we have to be around people who are not like we are. So we're going to have to be around people who we sometimes find irritating for being so freaking different. But that's a good thing, because that thing that you find really irritating about them is most often their greatest strength and most often also your greatest weakness. So they are complementing your weaknesses by being strong in the areas where you are not strong, which is also irritating. So instead of thinking that it's really irritating to have these different people around, we should start to applaud it, because it means that we have different skill sets, different points of view, different abilities in the people around us. So whenever you find people irritating, it's a good sign. It means that you're not in an echo chamber with people who are just like you. It means that you're exposing yourself to different kinds of thinking, different kinds of behaving, and different abilities. So the more irritating other people tend to be, the more you are in a group of people that can actually challenge you to grow. So it is a feature. And the more diverse the workplaces become, the more irritated we're going to feel. We just need to get better at being okay with the irritating feeling and get over it and actually go from being pissed off to cooperating. In case you have any questions or comments, I'm free and available for those now. And in case you want to double check what I just talked, here are the sources and materials if you want to take a picture. All right, any questions, any comments? There's one, or there's two, one more.
Yeah, I think that was an interesting sort of observation that also like people being really similar to you like are also like for some reason like super irritating. Like you can like notice it sometimes when you sort of two people that are sort of really similar and you like them for like similar reasons, and then you think that you kind of try to like sort of set it up so that they meet each other, and then they just hate each other for being so similar. Just a funny, I think it was a funny observation.
It's also the same thing why our children tend to be super irritating, because they are reflections of ourselves. So they annoy us because they are showing us where we are the worst. So that's why we can't be around with people who are too similar to us. Go ahead from the back of the room.
Yeah, so let's say you find yourself in a situation where you would benefit from changing the views of another person. How would you go about it?
Asking questions. If you want to change somebody's view on things, the fastest way to do that is to ask them questions. If you try to convince them, they will convince you back. If you try to ridicule them, they will stop listening. If you try to force them by giving them more data and more facts, it's not going to work. It's a funny thing. There's this video from MIT professor Tali Shart, where she explains that even being really intelligent does not stop you from thinking you are right, even when you are given opposite facts. You are just better at explaining why those facts cannot be true. So that doesn't, like forcing them to see otherwise doesn't work, but asking questions works, because when you ask good questions and try to really be curious about their answer so that they don't see that you're trying to convince them that they're wrong, but like trying to really understand how they think the way they do, they start to explain the thing, and often they start to find the holes in their logic while they are talking. And then asking another good question will direct them towards the end of the road where your solution then lies. That would be my suggestion.
Have a follow-up on that. Do you have any resources on how you would learn to ask questions?
Plenty. For example, there's this hosted negotiator called Chris Voss. He has a book called Never Split the Difference. That's one. Then there's Difficult Conversations from Sheila Heen and Douglas Stone. But if you want a list, can you send me an email, and I will send you a list of resources. Anything else? Yeah, and if anybody else wants a list, you can also send me an email. I'll be answering your emails tomorrow. Okay, go ahead.
So, where is your neighbor's car at the moment?
At their own yard.
What happened? Tell us what happened.
Okay, you want to know what happened? We actually had a valid reason to ask her not to park there anymore. So the spot is close to a smaller little building that has a sauna. And my spouse's sister came up with a renovation for their bathroom and sauna, so they had to use ours for a whole winter. So I just sent them a message saying that, hey, we've noticed that your car is sometimes parked to that spot, but now we would need that spot because they might need it for borrowing the sauna. And she was like, okay, I will tell the person who normally parks there. So it wasn't even her car. See, had I been pissed off about her, that would have ended really badly, probably in a lawsuit like all neighboring quarrels. Go ahead.
First of all, great presentation. As we're in the audience of a lot of developers, what do you think are the best tools and processes and whatnot to actually get into the underlying reason of what the other person is thinking, sort of, for example, when it comes to customers or the sales or whatever?
You mean that why they are being pissed off about the salesperson, or?
What are the tools that they can use or processes they can use to get into the nitty-gritty details of not being pissed off about people?
I don't have a ready-made tool or a process that I could throw at you at this moment. What I would do, well, first of all, if you're not the one who is pissed off and you're watching it from outside and you're seeing that they're okay, you're nodding, good. I would try to talk them through about those emotions. Like, make them talk and say that, hey, I can see that you're pissed off, what's going on? And let them talk about that pissed offness. Because the funny thing about emotions is that they are not true. Your thoughts are neither true. And emotions are passing visitors. So if you don't really get attached to them, they will pass. So sometimes it helps if I can just say out loud that I'm pissed off and not be judged by that. So now that you go next week and some of your colleagues is pissed off, it's a bad idea to say that you're pissed off and it's your fault that you're pissed off and you don't have to be pissed off, and that will only make them more pissed off. So instead of saying that I can see that you're pissed off, what do you want to talk about it? Sometimes just let them vent about it a bit might actually solve it at that point. But if they do have some valid reasons or valid points of why they are pissed off, then there's this responsibility process that I would maybe get familiar with. So whenever we have a problem, we start by blaming. We blame other people for our problem. Then when we start blaming, we start justifying. Every customer is like that. All the IT processes are like that. All the software is like this. This is why I have this problem. Then when we stop justifying, we end up feeling shame. Why do I have this problem? And then we feel obligation to fix the problem. But that's not the last stop, even if it sometimes feels like it's the last stop. The last stop is the actual responsibility where we ask, what do I want about this problem? How do I want this to end? And how can I get there? And often when you ask the person, okay, you're pissed off, you hate that, what would you want instead? And let them explain what they would want instead, and then ask, okay, what could we do to make that happen? Often actually ends up in quite simple sentences like, maybe we should talk with the client, or maybe I should explain to the salesperson why this pisses me off, or maybe I should have a meeting where we could go through these things that are really bothering me. Most often, and yes, I'm biased, the problem is that we're not communicating enough. And when we are communicating, we aren't communicating about the emotions, because hell should we talk about emotions at work, even though emotions at work are the reason we don't get any job done, because we're pissed off about people and technology and things. And if we just talked about it, we could get over it and get back to work. Does that answer your question?
Sort of, yeah.
Sort of. Yeah, it's a quite a huge topic that I've been trying to unravel for the past 4.5 years. There's about 50 podcasts and about 50 blog posts about the topic, so I think there might be something there to take a look at from at Koodarikuiskaaja.fi. There's the question.
Yeah, it's maybe not a question, more like to kind of see if I understood this correctly, because the way this kind of like boils down in my head is like we have lack of empathy for the other person, basically. Like, because if we understand where they're coming from, they're not going to be that mad about it.
Yeah, that sums it up quite nicely. Lack of empathy is one, and lack of data or information is the other. So when we are pissed off about people, we are making an interpretation, and in the heart of that interpretation is an assumption. And often that assumption is that they are doing that on purpose, and they are doing that on purpose to piss me off. When most of the time people don't do it on purpose, and even if they do it on purpose, they have no idea who you are and that you should be pissed off about the thing that they're doing. So it's most often not about us, the reason they are behaving the way they are. That was a good summary. Thank you. Okay. We can continue this conversation over beer. So yeah, let's wrap it up. Thank you.